You're listening to the Dennis Prager Show. One of my 2-3 favorite all-time topics is differences between men and women. And there is a new book on that very subject by a clinical professor of medicine at Columbia University. My brother is a clinical professor of medicine at Columbia University. So this is, you probably didn't know that. I couldn't expect you to know that, Marianne Legato, but just thought you might want to know. My brother is a colleague of yours.
Well, that's very nice. You might be interested to know that, like many medical schools, Columbia has very different titles for us, and I happen to be a professor of clinical medicine, which
oh, as opposed to a clinical professor. Oh,
if you can believe it.
That's funny.
Isn't that funny? I just wrote an editorial on that.
Where?
In my journal, Gender Medicine, I said the princes of the university are what are called full professors with unmodified titles, and they usually are the Nobel laureates and the people who bring money into the institution by doing research that commands grant money.
Uh-oh, I see. So the rest of you have modified titles.
We have what are called modified titles.
Oh, that's funny. So
all we can do is take very good care of patients.
Yeah, that's not a lot. So you are a professor of clinical medicine, and he's a clinical professor of medicine.
Right.
I have to tell him that's funny.
Tell him that one. He'll love it.
All right. Marianne Legato, Legato, and you're also an MD. So do you like professor or doctor? Which do you prefer?
I like Marianne.
I knew you'd say that, but I feel funny. I'm of the old school. But
okay.
I'll alternate all of them.
Okay, fine.
All right? Fine. Anyway, her book is Why Men Never Remember and Women Never Forget. A terrific title. I'm a big believer that titles tell a lot. And I've read some of your book. I purposely don't read whole books because I find I do a much better dialogue when I don't know exactly what they write, because otherwise I have no questions. Mm. It's a very interesting thing, but it's not for you to worry about. I love your opening story.
Most people do. It's pretty typical, don't you think so?
How long would it take me to read it? It would take a few minutes, wouldn't it?
Go ahead and read it. It's fun.
Okay, all right. Listen to the opening story, folks, and if there is any married couple that does not relate to this, you send me a letter, because I think that Marianne Legato will visit your home.
House call.
Yeah, exactly. Liz walks in the house to find her husband watching football in the den, while their toddler plays at his feet. She can tell that Ella has logged some serious playground hours from the sweaty smell that greets her as she leans over for a kiss. Did you have a big day at the park, sweetheart? Did you have fun on the slide? The house is a disaster, and they're expected at Tim's parents' house with as yet unbaked cookies in an hour. Liz dials a colleague's number as she takes ingredients out of the fridge. Phone cradled to her ear, she learns that an email with important information for tomorrow's meeting still hasn't arrived. She relays a modification to their upcoming presentation as she adds chocolate chips to the batter. Cookies in the oven, Liz heads toward the bedroom, stripping as she goes. She calls to Tim over her shoulder, "Will you get Ella ready to go? I've left her dress and shoes out." When Liz emerges, she finds Tim pacing impatiently by the door. Leaning over to adjust Ella's dress, she sees a sticky patch in her daughter's hair. "You cleaned her up, right?" she asks. "Yes," Tim says, exasperated. "We're late. Let's go." But when Liz reaches over to take Ella out of her car seat at her in-laws' house, she catches a whiff of that same coppery, sweaty playground smell. On inspection, Ella's pudgy hands, filled with Cheerios, are gray with grime. "Her hands are filthy, Tim," Liz hisses. "I'll deal with it when we get inside," he says, bewildered by her tone. Liz feels her growing irritation spill over into rage. "That's not the point, Tim. Why didn't you see how dirty she was when you were changing her? Look at her face. She needed a bath. This means that she's been eating dirt the whole time, which is completely disgusting, not to mention unsafe. What's wrong with you?" Tim turns on his heel, jaw set, and stalks into the house. "Kids eat dirt. She'll survive." Liz follows him, but her torrent of reproaches prompts no reply from her stony-faced husband. Once they've settled into the party, Tim recovers his equilibrium, but finds that his wife won't respond to his attempts at conversation. More confounded than empathetic, he engages his uncle in a heated and detailed discussion of the day's presidential press conference. Within moments, the political discussion has completely eclipsed Liz's distress in his mind. Tim's sister, on the other hand, takes one look at Liz's flushed face and dilated pupils and pulls her into the kitchen for a hug and a chat. I can't believe him, Liz fumes. She looked like something out of Oliver Twist. What was he thinking, putting her in a party dress without even bothering to take a swipe at her face and hands with a washcloth? The case against Tim builds. Lead levels in the soil in our neighborhood are astronomical, as if we didn't get enough of a scare after the renovation when the first tests came back high for lead. Does he want her to have brain damage? And builds. I asked him to put her in a dress. I asked if he'd clean her up. How much more specific do I have to be when I leave her with him? Do I have to remind him not to put her in the oven, too? Liz is just 3 paragraphs to go. Liz is on a slow simmer for the rest of the night. She goes over and over the argument in her head on the drive home. Unable to sleep, she reviews the notes for the following day's presentation, still analyzing the argument in the back of her mind. The next morning, Liz rebuffs Tim's invitation to make love and arrives at the breakfast table determined to find some kind of resolution. As usual, Tim resists any attempt to have a substantive discussion about the argument or what it means for their relationship. He doesn't care about me, Liz thinks miserably. He doesn't care that I'm unhappy. In fact, Tim doesn't even really know why she's mad. Why, he wonders for the 100th time, does every little thing have to turn into a full-blown drama? Why does she have to make such a big deal out of everything? And why, when it's over, can't she just move on? It's a great story.
Isn't it great? And it's so typical, I think.
I suspect so. Mm-hmm. And you know, I have to ask you, before we get into your fine book and the distinctions that you've analyzed empirically, how did you react to fellow academics hissing, booing, and finally getting rid of Lawrence Summers as president of Harvard because he did claim that men and women had different brains?
Well, I think that Dr. Summers just explained himself badly, and he will be forever, in a way, abused by the politically correct majority, which insists not that women and men are the same, but they say they're equal and equally able to perform the same tasks. That's true, but they have different ways of achieving those tasks, and that is the crucial thing that Summers didn't explain. If you test men and women in the aggregate, thousands and thousands and thousands of them, there are really differences in individuals in the ease with which they perform some tasks. That's not to say that all women can't be mathematicians or scientists.
But he didn't say all women can't, but he said maybe one of the reasons might be the brain.
That's right.
So what was wrong with that?
Well, people can't insist that men and women are the same. They just simply aren't. And I think that I just...
So were you embarrassed by your colleagues?
Yes, I'm frequently embarrassed by my colleagues.
I got to tell you, as a critic, and I went to Columbia. I mean, as a critic of academia, those stories don't play well outside of academia.
Mm-hmm, that's interesting. Well, don't you think politics hijacks science, as a smart man said to me recently?
As an example?
I think that people bend the facts to political aims. I think in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, it was very unpopular to say that women did tasks differently, had different...
Oh, exactly, but we expect more from academics. You're the folks who are supposed to be the guarantors of truth.
Well, as I understand it, these were not neurobiologists who challenged Dr. Summers.
Yeah, well, so it even makes it more remarkable.
Right.
All right, let's get to your book, Why Men Never Remember and Women Never Forget. Let me talk. Let's do it in 2 ways. One, what are the basic differences as you and as you have measured them as a professor of clinical medicine? Mm-hmm. And second, and I really want to spend time on this because you did something in the book that is difficult. You actually offer recommendations because it's easier, let's put it that way, to cite the pathology without giving recommendations.
That's right. You have to make it relevant to the people who are reading the book so that they don't put it down and say, so what?
Yeah, that's right. Or are we doomed to...
No, I think the good news is that we're not doomed. And let me start by saying that we know and have known for a decade or more that the brains of men and women are different. Men's brains are 10% larger than ours. They're different in anatomy in some parts of the brain. They have different concentrations or amounts of the messengers that carry messages from one nerve cell to another, called neurotransmitters. And certainly they have very different areas of the brain that work on the same tasks.
All right, we're going to continue in a moment. The book, Why Men Never Remember and Women Never Forget, it's actually written in English, not Academese. We'll return with Marianne Legato on the Dennis Prager Show.